welcome to my first podcast episode. I thought I'd give it a whirl. My name is Jes. I kind of just want to get on here to share bits of wisdom that I've learned. I'm 34. I moved across the country from Wyoming to Naples, Florida. So I was reading this book this morning by Batterson. It's called Win the Day. And he talks about rewriting your past and how two people can go through the same experience and come out completely differently. So I don't know why, but it made me think of this time in my life in my 20s where I was kind of forced to slow down and really listen to God. I had already kind of promised God that I'd spend time with him every morning for the rest of my life. And that was after hearing, I wish I could quote it perfect, but I was listening to a talk, and this guy on stage said how he talks to so many college students, and they say oh, I'd read the Bible, but I'm just not much of a reader. And he said, if you can commit, I'm not quoting it word for word, but he said, if you can commit to reading one book the rest of your life, I pray to God it's the Bible. And somehow it just made it doable for me. Starting in tiny doses, it just makes me feel able. So anyway, I had been reading the Bible, and first, I was in a place where I wanted to sell my car. And I just kind of felt guilty for having that nice of a car. And anyway, so there was this younger girl that went to the bank and got approved and wanted to buy my car. Oh my gosh. I'm struggling with having gnats in my condo, so it got up my nose. Anyway, so I was reading the Bible, and it's I usually know it's God when it kind of just comes out of left field. And I'm sure I have it in one of my notebooks, but I was reading some scripture, and it specifically said don't sell this to them. It's dangerous, pretty much. And I called my dad, who was the one communicating with this girl, and I said, I don't think I can sell her this car. I think it's dangerous for her. And I explained why, and he got frustrated, rightfully so. And I said, okay, you can sell her this car, but you need to take responsibility if something happens. And he got mad. And he wrote down the scripture and reached out to her. And I guess her grandma was strong in her faith. And she read the scripture, and she said, you're not buying this car. And what I had planned was to sell the car and basically go backpack through California. And my original plan was to go from there to Egypt to France for Christmas, and then France to Ireland for New Year's. So I really just wanted to go, and I felt like God just kept saying, not yet, not yet. And one day I was like, well, whatever, I just want to go. And I was going to go. And I started getting this lower back pain, like severe. So I went and got checked out, and it turned out that I had multiple kidney stones. I had 5 large ones. I had like 7 large ones and a bunch of small ones. And it's interesting because I did research on how you get kidney stones. And one thing that I read was protein powder. And I had been taking protein powder and was in a phase of working out all the time. So anyway, I was kind of just forced to sit and rest for like a month. Really just like sitting in this one position with heating pad on my lower back. And in that time, I read through Job. I had never read through Job before. And I guess what I got from it is that there's purpose in the pain. There's a higher purpose. And long story short, I ended up having to get surgery to get the stones blasted out, all the large ones. And I quit the protein powder, and I haven't had any troubles with that pain again. I didn't recall passing kidney stones, the small ones, but it's been fine since. And if I would have just gone without really listening to God, if I would have just sold that car and not been brave in speaking out about what I felt God was telling me, like, who knows what would have happened. Who knows if she would have gotten hurt in the car. Who knows where I would have been on my travels when I had to go to the hospital alone. Like, there's just always purpose in the pain. So I'm gonna check and make sure this is recording just because it's my first one. Okay, yes. So anyway, I was reading this morning, and he talked about like, I highlighted, there is nothing wrong with asking God to change your circumstances, but his primary objective is changing you. Every testimony starts with a test. Pass the test, you get a testimony. And testimony is the way you overcome next obstacle. And And it's kind of like if we don't take the time to reflect on what's really happening in our life, if we just choose to complain about whatever obstacle we're going through, it tends to happen over and over because we're not taking the time to learn the lesson that needs to be learned. And it all just makes sense. God's purpose is so much greater. There's a reason for everything. I used to believe that wholeheartedly when I was little. And then I grew up and became aware of all the pain in the world. And pain that I experienced myself. And I kind of just bowed out from that belief. Bow out. But it's like God's reeling me back in and making me realize, like, there's a greater purpose. His sight is from way up high, while my sight is only at 5'10". And all throughout Scripture, it talks about looking up at the sky. And man, we don't do that enough, do we? We kind of just look at everything going on in the world at eye level and below. We're so distracted. Whereas if we were to just look up more, we see the beauty that hasn't been distorted by people. Especially, gosh, nature is just so beautiful. And I believe there's a purpose for all of it. What other reason would there be for beautiful sunsets besides the fact that the colors are so pleasing to our eyes, and that they somehow give us this pure peace when we can just shut out the noise and look at these beautiful colors that are somehow pleasing to our human eyes. Is there any other purpose for those colors? Hearing the birds sing. And how relaxing it is to human ears. Feeling the wind, which I have a love-hate relationship for wind. Because in Wyoming, it's just so brutal in the winter. But I'm also pretty skinny, and it's just more painful than anything. But down here, more and more, I find myself just hanging out under the palm trees. Because I love the sound of their leaves just bristling together in the wind. When it's windy, I would find myself, in the winter it can get fairly cold here. 50s down to 30s. And your body does acclimate to the weather. So anyway, I got dressed up in pants and a hoodie and grabbed my sweatshirt and went down to the pool and just sat under a chair under the palm trees. And it was just so peaceful to me. So, switching gears, I'm trying to think what else I wanted to talk about today. Elon. I've been messaging my friend, Kathy, and we've been talking about how it hurts our hearts how much people attack him. And people form these opinions based on other people's opinions. They form opinions based on other people's edited videos of bits and clips of things he says. And I'm a firm believer that you don't really know somebody's character unless you watch like a really long interview. You have to watch it and watch their nonverbal communication. For a while, I was like really obsessed with Paul Ekman's studying what he teaches. He's this psychologist that came up with the 7 universal micro expressions. And there's a lot more micro expressions that he discovered. But these 7 are universal, where anywhere in the world, people have these little tiny, quick facial muscle movements that express what they're feeling. So behind their words, you can tell what they're feeling around that topic or around what they just said. You can read if they've got disgust, hatred behind something they're talking about or someone they're talking about. You can see if they're lying. And after studying long interviews of Elon, he's got really good intentions. And I also know a lot about autism. I think more than the majority of people. Not majority, like the majority of society. I'm not an expert by any means, but I've been around it enough that I understand, like, they don't always get social cues. They don't get sarcasm. It is very black and white in their minds. Right and wrong, true and false. And Elon almost has put on all this pressure for himself in thinking that he's got to help as many people as he can in this lifetime. So much so that he just doesn't sleep enough. He doesn't care for himself enough. Because he believes that there's this mission. He's got a mission to help people that need it. And it's heartbreaking to see all the hateful actions based on other people's perceptions. And if they would only take the time to learn about our physiology, and how much we communicate with our body language. Like, yeah, his words may not be perfect, but you can tell a lot by how his body is responding to topics, especially his face. Oh, Matt. So yeah, that's how I feel about him. I'm not saying that everything he chooses to do is good or right. I should say right. But nobody's perfect. Most people, like, they've just got... Everyone's belief of right and wrong is based on their past experiences. And that includes their influences and who they choose to trust, whose opinions they choose to trust. Yeah. That's all for today.